Yo, what up, friends?
Getting into world news, crazy in the space exploration. NASA has a what's called the Parker Solar Probe, and this is going to get within, and this is crazy, 3.8 million miles from the sun's surface. It's going to be the closest human-made object to ever get, or the closest a human-made object will or has ever gotten so far. Can't say will. We don't know what will happen in the future, but that's crazy, and it gets even crazier that they will be 3.8 million miles away, but the heat shields will reach 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature. 3.8 million miles away from the sun, and it's 1,800 degrees. That's just unfathomable to even think about. I read that and I was like, what? They're that far away and it's still that hot? And it's still that hot. That's like 18 times some of the hottest places we have here, right? Like, I mean, well, if you go into some of the deserts, may get a little hotter, but that was wild to me. So figured I had to make sure everybody knew a fun fact like that. Moving on into more important world news, though, that was more on the space exploration front. China has come out this past weekend. Their government is protesting the announcements of U.S. military sales and assistance to Taiwan, warning that the United States is playing with fire. Now, so what's the backstory on this? President Joe Biden authorized this past weekend the provision of up to $571 million in Defense Department materials and services and military education and training for Taiwan. Well, the Chinese government obviously did not take kindly to that, as they consider Taiwan to be a territory of the mainland of China. So, since they do, and since Joe Biden also gave 295 million back in September, this has got the Chinese government up in arms, and they are protesting it as a dangerous move that could undermine the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, which is a island of 23 million people. That obviously their history, right, goes way back. This is a splitting of the Chinese populace. Again, China still considers Taiwan to be their territory. Taiwan considers themselves to be their own country. We have a one China policy here in the United States that our government is mandated to follow, but also at the same time we are, and it's a weird dichotomy, but we're also dependent to be or will be dependent on to defend some of these countries out here, that not just Taiwan, there's other countries as well, like what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. The situation is pretty much the exact same sort of scenario there. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. Biden is he's not making a lot of people happy as he leaves the office, especially not on the conservative side of the aisle. Um, just today as well, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but he commuted the sentences of 37 of the 40 death row inmates, which means they won't face the death penalty. So, depending on where you stand on that issue, would be what you thought about that. The commuting of those sentences, they will still spend the rest of their life in jail, though. So, they're still going to face their punishment. But again, how you feel about the death penalty? Some may say that some people that commit heinous crimes don't deserve to be among the human population. So take that for what it is. But again, a lot of people just aren't happy with some of the things that are going on. The more military assistance to Ukraine, now with Taiwan, and then previously the pardoning of his son, which any father should do. That's crazy that anybody would think otherwise. But yeah, I mean, I can see why the conservative side of the aisle would be, kind of like, what's going on, man? This guy is just, throwing everything at the wall while he's on his way out. So, we'll see how it ends up affecting his legacy into the future. But to say that it was an inauspicious start with the Afghanistan withdrawal, and to say that it's a little rocky ending, with the Kamala being put up for the presidency in his place, and him sort of not being around these last couple months of his presidency. We'll see how that affects his legacy in the long run. But it's definitely going to take away from the good that he did, because he did a lot of good within the middle portion of his presidency, and so this will definitely, I assume, will give it some kind of hit to that. Moving on in other U.S. news, Starbucks. We're having a strike in Starbucks in L.A., Chicago, Seattle. There are labor disputes. It is a 5-day strike that has been enacted by the union, who represents 11,000 of the Starbucks workers. They are now striking and protesting for better wages. They want a wage increase. The company had proposed a 1.5% pay raise in future years. In the latest contract offer this past week, this was per the actual union strike announcement. The union argued that Starbucks has more room to go before they can actually meet their demands. And as always, it gets kind of hairy when you're talking about workers who are getting paid minimum wage or maybe a little more, which still is not anything in this country and still needs to be increased to a level necessary to be able to live in this country. So that's a whole different subject that we could get into at another time. But the CEO, Brian Nickel, who was put in September, could earn up to $100 million in compensation in his first year for hitting all sorts of goals. And I mean, you got to be kidding me. So the Starbucks CEO is can possibly, not that he would, but could possibly make this grand amount of money, and you're telling me that you can't pay your workers a little more? Nah, man, that don't jive with me. And this is exactly why I believe in unions being able to fight for worker rights and other, uh, less powerful entities and segments of workers. And I mean, just like the college athletes with the NIL and trying to get rid of the Sherman Antitrust Act with the amateurism and all this stuff. So I mean, I get paid what you can. We live in a capitalist society. Uh, that's what a capitalist society does. You give the opportunity for everybody to make as much money as their talent or their skills will allow them to make. Now, where you go after that, taxes, things like that, is going to be different for every person. But at least, right, you have the opportunity to make as much money in a capitalist society as your skills and your talent will allow you to make. But this isn't the only strike going on. Also in Germany, Volkswagen just settled striking union workers there. They had planned to shutter 3 plants around the country. That they will no longer do that now after the strike, but they will cut jobs. So there's always going to be pros and cons with every single scenario that kind of goes into, better pay, better working conditions, which they were also aiming for, similar to Amazon and how they've had their issues with the union and the being wanting better worker conditions. We've heard the horror stories, people not being able to take bathroom breaks and things like that. And I know Amazon workers, so I actually know firsthand that those things are true. And so, if you're expecting people to do a job that is making your company more money, you can't then expect them to want to, or at least even be motivated enough to do a good job if you're not providing them basic proper working conditions or a basic livable wage. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with in this situation here at Starbucks. I'll get you a better answer. I'm gonna do some more research into this situation as the week goes on, and I'll give you an update next week. Uh, Also, speaking of the government, Congress passed the last minute government funding bill to avoid a shutdown. Now, I worked for the government for a long time, and it's funny because this comes up every year. This happens every damn year. It's the same thing every year. There's always going to be some shutdown, and then they always figure it out at the last minute, maybe a day or two. It never really ever goes to an extensive shutdown. Every blue moon, sure, it might happen, but for the most part, it is scare tactics used by politicians in order to push more things through that they want. So it came out that there was a huge proposal put out, and if you're on X or you're on Twitter or you follow Elon Musk, you heard that he, I believe he tweeted, and I don't know the correct number on this, so I'm not even going to count the number, but 100 times or something about the bill in like a 24-hour period, and how inflated it was and all these other things. They ended up cutting it down a significant portion and ended up pushing it through. President Biden is expected to sign that deal and would extend it. It would fund the government through mid-March. It would extend the farm bill for 1 year and would allocate $100 billion in disaster relief alongside $30 billion in emergency aid for our farmers. Now, this was obviously in contrary to what incoming President-elect Donald Trump wanted. He wanted there to be the cap on the spending, so that way he did not have to deal with that incoming deficit that then would be put on his plate, which is understandable coming from his side. Of course, he wouldn't want that. Anybody who would be on that side wouldn't want that. But at the same time, this happens, as I mentioned, every single year, and it's the same story every time. So it's not going to change just because there's a change in the presidency. Speaking of Donald Trump, he came out with some more policies and other things he wants to do when his presidency does start. His transition team has announced that they would like to withdraw from the World Health Organization. Also, at his speech at America Fest this weekend, he floated taking back control of the Panama Canal, citing concerns over the high fees for ships that are doing passage through the canal. Each ship has to pay a fee depending on size, country, cargo, all that good jazz that gets factored into the formula to come up with how much someone would pay. So just a lot of different things that are being thrown around that are supposed to happen once he gets back into office. And so we'll see. He even said that he vowed to oblige Russian President Vladimir Putin, who says that he wants to speak with Donald Trump in hopes of ending the Ukraine-Russian war. Again, as I mentioned last week, anytime you have anything coming from the Russian propaganda machine of Putin and the rest of them, you've got to just take that with a grain of salt until you actually see them put it into action, because a lot of times it's just propaganda, because that's what they specialize in. Is psyop, psychological operations, making people feel less than due to operations that they use in ways to get people to think the way that they want people. Speaking of the Trump, Lara Trump, excuse me, has removed her name from consideration to fill Marco Rubio's soon-to-be vacant Senate seat. So that's an update. You'll remember I mentioned a few weeks ago that there was a rumor that she would probably be taking that Senate seat, even though she had no political experience. Well, apparently the blowback on that was not to her liking, and so she has removed her name from that. I have to assume that was what was the case, or she just realized she had no experience for that. Either way, she will not be doing that. All right. Moving on to entertainment. Got a couple notes here in the entertainment world. First of all, the James Bond franchise has stalled at Amazon. So, and it's over family disagreements, as usual with this sort of thing. But there's been speculation in the air about who would be the next Bond, if there ever would be another Bond movie to come out. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Barbara Broccoli, which, what a fantastic name that is. It sounds like a cartoon villain, Barbara Broccoli. And her daughter, Bond producer Albert R. Broccoli. It was Mr. Mustard in the kitchen with the knife. Clue, what a great game. Who, anyway, still retains creative control over the franchise. distrust Amazon's reliance on algorithms and personal data to make their movies. So basically, what that means in layman's terms is they don't trust Amazon to create good enough Bond films based on their track record thus far. So, but Amazon holds all rights to release any new Bond movies by virtue of its purchase from MGM Studios back in 2021. Although to this point, already 3 years into the deal, only one Bond show has been made by Amazon, and that was a reality show called 007 Road to a Million. We will see what happens there. We'll keep you updated. Netflix has got exclusive U.S. broadcasting rights for the 2027 and 2031 FIFA Women's World Cup. So the Women's World Cup, obviously very, very hot commodity, being the fact, the women's soccer team here in America, especially, and in a lot of other countries too, but especially here in America, has been much better than the men's team in the past couple decades. So that being the case, it's a very hot commodity to have that FIFA World Cup, and Netflix will be the ones actually having those rights for 2027 and 2031.
5,000.